On 10 years since I've been to Las Vegas, so I've noticed a few changes around town, just a few. A little bit about the wines. On your left is the 05, and as Joseph said, on the right's the R09, our current vintage and release of the Russian River. A little bit about the 05. It's a small family-owned vineyard and winery in the heart of the Russian River in Healdsburg. And if you all been to Healdsburg in the wine country, I assume before. Well, you know what the pundits are calling Healdsburg these days? Beverly Healdsburg.
No.
But as you've all been to Healdsburg, you know it's not. Coming up next week is our Memorial Day parade, which if you've been to Healdsburg, you know, you got the baton twirlers and the 4-H kids, the little girls towing their 200-pound pigs, so you're not thinking Rodeo Drive. It's a great, small community, which I say is a great place to go grapes and kids, which we do. And we've got a 17.5 acre property. All we do is Pinot. We've got about 13.5 under cultivation. I bought the property in 2000. Lived there with my wife and our little 1-year-old and 4-year-old. So I bought the property in 2000. At that time, it was just a vineyard and was selling fruit to Gloria Ferrar for their sparkling program. And I'd looked at, I'd evaluated about 100 properties I wanted to be in Russian River and put boots on dirt before buying this property in 2000. And, I've looked at probably 22 boots on dirt, and it was a rocking great business model selling, because with the Chardonnay and the Pinot Noir combination, you can hang them heavy and sell them to a sparkling program, which I did. And the business was, making money at purchase. So that was my first year in my introduction to winemaking 101. And I have no agrarian background. I was born in Palo Alto. My dad was an investment banker, so we weren't growers or anything. So in 2000, my then vineyard management company said, "Mark, don't worry. We got the Gloria Ferrar contract, automatic renews. I sell fruit to both Gloria Ferrar and the VP for their personal vineyards and programs. No problem." Well, that was in January 2000. We got to March. I said, "Where's our contract?" May came along. Where's the contract? Finally, in August, I called Michael, who was the VP at Gloria Ferrar. May still be. I said, "This is Mark Ketcham, and I was wondering, I haven't seen our grape contract." And he goes, "Oh, yeah, I'm sorry, Mr. Ketcham, but we're not renewing because our estate vineyards are all coming online." So that was my introduction. I've got a vineyard that's hanging heavy. We're talking 8 to 10 tons an acre for a sparkling program at the end of August. And I didn't know anybody. A friend of mine who's a grower over nearby said, "Mark, this is the toughest year. I've got friends that I've known for 20 years, they're not returning my call." And I'm thinking, oh my, so much for the Harvard Business Review modeling, right? It was more like the clown that was on the wrong side of the Harvard Business Review modeling. But, it's the old sort of Zen thing about, when a door closes, pay attention, the window opens. So I just started calling people, and one thing led to the next, and what ended up being a sort of bad situation turned into a great one because I got to meet a lot of people that otherwise would. So our first, for the first 4 years, I just was a grower. I ripped out 40% of the chard and replanted that immediately after the first harvest with Pinot. And coming around to the 05 was my founding winemaker was Michael Brown of Costa Brown, who has been, I'm sure you all know, the sort of the darling of Wine Spectator. And people all ask me all the time how, because he made the Costa Brown and the Ketcham Estate, which you have. And so people ask me all the time, "Mark, how did you get Michael Brown as your winemaker?" And the true answer is that I knew him before he was sprinkled with a fairy dust of rock stardom. So he made the 2005, which we brought a Magnum. Joseph said, "Bring some mags." Everybody always likes that. So that's the one on your left. And Michael made our wines, our Pinots, for the first 3 years, and then, as we say in private equity, he had a little liquidity event, and Costa Brown got rolled up into Bill Price's group. So The 2009, which is our current release and vintage, was made by Scott Rich, who also does, I'll come back to it. And so he made our 2008s and 2009s. Back to the small vineyard type thing, we're very sustainable. We don't do organic and biodynamic, mainly because I'm a bit of a libertarian. I think the less sort of government intervention and so forth is okay with me. But both our kids as well as our extended family, the Ordez family, who's my vineyard manager and so forth, they live on property, and our kids are in the property in the vineyards all the time. So anything that we wouldn't want our children to have is not on not on property. So we subscribe to all these sort of organic practices without certification, because we're totally about sustainable and nothing poisonous on the property. Before I go on, any questions? Answers? Yes?
Yeah, would you bring your tonnage down from?
Oh, great question. Well, the 2009 vintage, we were 2.89 tons per acre. Last year, we were 3.01 tons per acre. Yeah, I mean, 8 to 10. I won't say who bought that 2000 vintage, but I'll only say that their vineyard manager, it was a very big company, and I was like, the irony of it all was this: the new kid on the block. Had it not been for these guys to step in and buy that fruit that first year, I would have had to add insult to injury. I would have had to pay to have the fruit dropped on the ground, because you can't have 8 to 10 tons. It's just too much on the vine to sustain, and you got all kinds of potential problems. So that all, we dropped. He said, "Look, I'll take the fruit at the brother-in-law price, but you need to drop 80% in the next 3 days, because we only had a month to go." So that was my introduction to vineyard management that in 2000. And after that, as I mentioned, I pulled out all the Chardonnay, and then I wanted to do still wines. So I would say we're typically, with the exception maybe the 2010 vintage, we're somewhere in the 2.5 to 3, depending on the blocks. Talking about a little bit about that, I call it you've heard of the famous double helix, right? In the vineyard, I call it the double matrix. And what I mean by that is the matrix on the bottom is what I really look after. I'm not a winemaker. I don't, it's above my pay grade. But I do look after the vineyard with Roberto Ordez, who's my vineyard manager, who lives on property, as I said, our extended family. What I try to do is that we've got 2 major blocks, all broken up into different clonal types. We've got all the Dijons, the 828, 777, 667, 115, and not 114, and then we've got the Pommard 4. And I have now replanted about 80%, 85% of the vineyard into those various clones. Our oldest block, and the only one original from 2000, is an old block Pommard 4, which we think is probably 30 years old. And that's a component. We have another block of newer Pommard 4. It's about 7 or 8 years old, something like that. I look at, like our 828 as part of our rocket fuel, gets those really bright, high red notes, is sort of in the front of the palate. And to me, the Pommard 4, I don't know if this is too geekish or, what level we want to talk about, but to me, Pommard 4 speaks Burgundy. I mean, it gives that wonderful rounded taste, sort of the foresty, mushroomy, those just incredible flavors that are so important for food. And I want to say thank you so much. I mean, in terms of land, I mean, that's one of those magical ethereal pairings with Pinot. Joseph and I were talking about on the way over. We're a bunch of screwballs in California. We've outlawed foie gras. Well, not we, our politicians, and that literally ends this year sometime. And one of those other sort of ethereal pairings to me is seared foie gras with a nice Chateau Yquem. So, and like type, lamb, salmon, fish, all those types of things. What we do, what we try and do, we find a balance. Like Michael Brown, my founding winemaker, he likes a little bit higher alcohol. I really go towards in the sort of 14 to 14.5 max, although we haven't done a 14.5. I mean, I think on the bottle it's 14.1, but the Russian River was actually a real 14.2. And to me, any varietal, what to me makes a great wine, it's got to have balance and structure. I think that Merlot got beat up because of the Sideways movie inappropriately, but some people were making these, and there's just phenomenal Merlots, but people were making these big, juicy, fruity wines, but they were what I call, flabby. It was like you got that, you go, oh my God, this is great, and then it just kind of fell off a cliff. And that's where I look at, is the balance and structure. And one of the things that we look to do is have enough acidity in it so that it stays with you, it builds. And our estate bottling, we like to tell people that if they can, hold it for at least a year before you pour. Being in the business, it's a little tough, as we all know, because people want to pop and pour and all that type of stuff. Our 09, I think, I should ask you guys if you've tasted, we think it's drinking extraordinarily well. And yeah, 05's on the left, 09's on the right. And Scott Rich, who is Talisman, is his winery and brand, made the 09 for us. But we try and build wines really for food. I call the two sort of distinction, the higher alcohol, I call them stand-up drinkers when you're at a great party with friends. But sometimes they don't pair so well in the higher alcohol range, and trying to get that balance and structure with your foods. And that's why this is personal, is in the 14s somewhere, and certainly can be less. But you find a balance between having great body and structure with some of the alcohol and acidity. Any other questions? Yes.
Going back to the clones, when you mentioned the Pinot Noir, so are you taking the four and you're blending them and trying to get a balance with those, or are you strictly using?
Great question. Didn't hear it was what are we doing on our blending? Back to that matrix. What we do we sell fruit as well. So I was selling to Bob Cabral over at Williams-Sonoma and Gary Farrell at Elysian for their programs, and Topel. But I mean, again, we're very small, but I was very flattered that guys like that were buying fruit for their programs. So the answer is that back to the bottom part of that matrix, we do it by block and by clone. We pick our farming practices. I don't think could be more expensive than the way we do it, because as a little vineyard, you got fixed costs, bringing your tractors and stuff, all that on property. And we typically, I'd love to do it once. It's impossible for my vineyard to do it one time, just because like the 828 and the Pommard 4 get ripe, much last, and the Dijons get going earlier. So what we do is, like on our estate bottling, I do the Old Block Pommard 4, 777 and 667. The Russian River is a blend of everything, but the Old Block Pommard 4, we have a newer block, which is Rock, and blend all five of those into what you're drinking in both of these wines. Other questions? Thank you. One of the things I think is we're trying to build some wines that will last. I mean, it keeps hopefully keeps getting better in the bottle. Our first year was '04, and it was a classic wine country story. A buddy of mine, a wine drinking buddy of mine, suggested, "Hey, Mark, why don't we take a couple tons off property and make wine, which we did. There was a company in San Francisco that was catering to sort of the hipsters called Crush Pad. A guy named Michael Brill started it. Do you know Crush Pad? Okay, so we literally, got 2 tons off my property, brought it down to the warehouse district south of Market in San Francisco, and that was our it was technically our first commercial year. Our first production year, but it was very, very small, and but the '05 was our first real, what we consider to be our commercial year. And I found Michael Brown, we were at a tasting at the World of Pinot, and I kept circling back to about 125 wineries pouring, and I said, look, when you get back up to Healdsburg, let's get together and have lunch. I'd like to talk to you about, making wine for me. And he said, yeah. So he and I and my now ex-partner had one of those, boozy 4-hour lunches in a place called Ralph Bistro in the square. You know Ralph's?
Fries.
Okay. So we had a 4-hour boozy lunch there, and I said, well, Michael, what do you think? He goes, dude, man, we got a deal. And he said, but I want to see your vineyard. So we drove over to my place, which is only 5 minutes away. And we had another, 4.5 boozy, so we ended up at like 11 o'clock at night, and that was how, Michael Brown came to make our wines and starting out. Backspacing a little bit to how, the balance and structure thing. One of the things that Michael really liked was a whole cluster component to, which can make, for a wonderfully balanced and big wine. I personally, Steve, my ex-partner, and Michael used to think it's funny when we did all our barrel tastings. They pull the wine thief and take a whole cluster barrel, and I'd about gag from it, and they thought it was so funny, like I couldn't taste it. But the reality is, it's when blending, it's an incredible component. Again, that bottom part of the matrix. So my job is to provide a whole matrix of flavor profiles to both my winemaker as well as the ones like Cabral and Gary Farrell and these other guys that are making wines. The top part of that matrix is, of course, the winemaker, and whether it's my program or theirs, what I see is that combination of the choice of the French oak, which barrels, what percentage is new oak, 1-year-olds, 2-year-olds, 3-year-olds, and balancing that. I mean, it's not like it's a trade secret. What I like is is about a third, new oak, new French oak, a balance of different manufacturers with a medium toast, and then about a third 1-year-olds, and then the other third is 2-year-old and neutrals. And that to me, gives it a little bit of the balance and structure and that sort of thing. Another thing I'd like to say to you guys is that, how often do you get out to the Sonoma wine country? Pretty often? Not enough? 3 times a year?
That's still not enough.
Well, we don't have a tasting room on property. As I said, Allie, my wife, and our kids live on property, but if you guys want, we'd love to host you, pop a few corks, and break some bread if you want. If you don't have my card, I'm happy to give it to you. And I mean it. I mean, just shoot me an email. That's my direct dial number at our vineyard home. And I actually, despite my being a techno Luddite, I actually am fairly fluid on regular email. I don't do texting a lot of that stuff. We'd love to have you guys come by, and we're 5 minutes from downtown Healdsburg.
For those of you that don't know, Horizon Air Airlines has a direct flight to Santa Rosa. It's a 15-minute cab ride into Healdsburg, and you're there.
Yeah, 10 minutes from my house.
It's a Horizon Air / Alaska Airlines.
Well,
It's very inexpensive, and it's
I'm going to
hour and 15 minutes.
San Helena this coming week to get a table replacement. And I try to get flights with Hawaiian Air, or there's another airline that flies to either Sacramento or Santa Rosa.
Yeah.
That's $600.
Right.
That's only like usually 200 to 10 on Horizon Air.
Each way.
No, both ways.
Really?
The brother-in-law price.
Yeah.
Horizon
It's
Air.
a little tiny airport, that Charles Schultz Airport.
Yep.
I would have gone to,
Yeah, and it's great because